Good morning and welcome to PACT's Talent Connect Roundtable. I'm Dean Miller, the President and CEO of PACT, and we want to welcome you to a really interesting conversation. You've seen plenty of news around talent and the shortage of talent in a number of different areas, the challenges around that, and we're going to dig deep here this morning in a roundtable fashion. We're really excited about the conversation, and this is an ongoing conversation that we want to encourage you all to have, and we have a number of ways to plug in on that. We couldn't do what we do without some great support, and I want to thank our sponsors, who are some of, by the way, the biggest tech employers in this region, including SEI, Vanguard, Boomi, Cigniti, and an organization that helps a lot of them fill those positions, Juno Search Partners. With that, I want to recognize we are on a new platform, Run the World. And this is a platform really designed to be a bit more engaging and allow us to fluidly move from speaker to networking. And so enjoy this new platform. You're muted, you're off camera, but you can ask questions. So you see that there's a chat ability to do that. And we'll monitor that throughout. At about 9:30, 9:35, we will transition to small roundtables where we can continue the dialogue, and there'll be specific subjects on those tables. And by the way, you can move from table to table as well, and we'd encourage you to do that. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator this morning, Steve Brittin. Not a stranger to this community, Steve has been helping entrepreneurs and tech companies with their talent strategies for years. He is currently the head of growth and strategy, as well as a venture partner with Juno. And again, you know Juno is Juno Search Partners. They also have Juno Capital, which is invested in a number of Philadelphia area high growth tech companies. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you very much for allowing me to moderate the session today. As Dean mentioned, I am Steve Brittin. I actually have over 25 years experience in human capital consulting and talent acquisition. Also have a previous life in psychology and cognitive therapy. So pretty much a nerd in that area. As we were planning to create the next Talent Connect, a lot of the ideas were coming through, and we were really realizing that there was a little bit of fatigue in talking about pandemic strategies and, COVID and, what are the great tips for working remote. And we wanted to shift this a little bit because I think we really need to start looking a little bit more future. And for the past 18 years, employers have been hyper-focused on just trying to figure out how people work and just how do they get to the status quo. And what has happened along that lines is that we've assumed that traditional retention strategies were going to suffice and keep people, employed and keep people happy. But there certainly has been a shift in the way people work, and employees really actually realize that they have options. They have options about where they can work, how they can work, and certainly when you have those options, you start gaining a little bit more confidence in terms of wanting to, have a preference of how I am an employee for a company, and we needed to shift that. And companies need to realize that the technologies that we have is, being able to have real-time data, active feedback channels, and flexible real estate, really all need to work together to generate what that future empathetic, engaged workforce looks like. So I want to introduce the panel. And as we move on, let's start with Jess, or actually let's start with Christelle, Patrick, and then Jess. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm Christelle Bron. I run the America's Agile practice for CBRE. What it means is we help company define their flexible strategy, their real estate strategy, and how to bring flexibility in their portfolio, and we help them implement on it. I'm part of a bigger practice, consulting practice at CBRE. You might not know, but CBRE, beyond being a real estate firm, we help people think through talent, location, and strategy, workplace strategy, and help them also manage the change that goes with all of this.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Callahan. I'm the founder of CompassRed. We're a data science and data innovation lab. So basically, all the machine learning and that type of thing we build for a lot of the clients here in the Philadelphia region. We're actually located in Wilmington, in Philadelphia. I'm not sure that matters anymore, where that is, and we'll talk about that. But to tell you a little bit of the context I'll be talking from today, we're about 25 people. Usually we're getting new employees right out of the master's or PhD programs, and sometimes are coming with experience. But it's a new field, so we're using a lot of the new ideas and techniques that come out of the university. So there's the people that we have to hire, retain, and grow. And it's quite interesting in this environment. Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Podgajny. I am co-founder and CEO of LLUNA, and we are a technology platform that enables managers or their companies to offer personalized employment to employees. Really what that's all about is flexibility and choice that meets employees where they are now and where they are over time as they change as people. I'm a former management consultant, a former chief people officer, have spent the better part of the last 2 decades focused on organizational change, culture building, and really thinking about how to motivate people to be engaged with and connected to the purpose of their work in a way that works for them. Really excited for this conversation today.
Thank you all for joining. So, as Dean had mentioned, we're experiencing some unique times right now. There's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of attrition that companies are facing. You can call it early signs was the Great Resignation. We started talking about the Great Reshuffle, and I think most recently I saw the Great Realization. The interesting part about that word is that the Great Realization is actually more employee focused. It's not about the employer. And so I think we have a unique scenario of that, what we're heading to into the future. A little interesting data that I was finding as part of this attrition, because I was really kind of digging deep in terms of, well, who's really leaving? Who's moving around? And I looked at it from more of a generational standpoint. And since 2020, Gen Zs, which are in the workforce, are probably somewhere in around 18 to 25-year-olds, have the highest level of job transitions. Up to 80% of that total generation has moved around. Tidbit is that they also have been they were the most affected in the beginning of the pandemic, because of the way the world working. Millennials have the second highest rate, and they're at 50%. So half of the entire workforce, of millennials are looking to move. Then we get into the Gen Xers, where 31%, we've always been that stable, group there. And then, pardon the pun, boomers, they're actually up by just 5%. So when we look at why people are leaving, what is it that they're really looking for? Help us understand what is it that employees look for. Let's start with Jess.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I think what's interesting about what has happened, I'll throw another one in there, the Great Reflection, is that people are thinking about, how am I spending my time? Where do I want to spend my time? Who do I want to spend it with? And that reflection, I think, has led to a lot of people reprioritizing the way their work-life mix is working for them. And I think that spans generations, but certainly Gen Z, with only a couple of years in the workforce in general, are like, what am I doing this for? Why am I doing it? And so at the end of the day, what's not new is that people want flexibility, and they want employment that's going to support them in their life and in their work goals. I think what is new is that all of the sudden, instead of people saying, I need to need to conform to what the employer is offering me, they're saying, I'm just going to move. I'm going to make another move. I feel more confident and comfortable changing jobs for the types of flexibility that I'm looking for. I think the other really critical thing as well is the meaning behind work, that People want to feel like when they're going into the office, or virtually going to the office, they're spending time on something that has meaning. And employers, I think, sometimes struggle with that because you're like, well, we're making money here. Like how do I tie meaning to profit? And it can take some creativity, but there are ways to do that, to connect with people's motivations for where they're spending their time. And the other thing I think that's really interesting is we're learning that the people's needs are going to change and evolve over time. That's always been true. But again, as employers, that there wasn't really this thinking of I need to accommodate that. And now there is this give and take that needs to happen. So I think where employers and employees can recognize that we're all human and have this like human-centered focus versus like, here are the corporate policies. That human-centered approach says, I get that what you need right now might change later, and I'm here to support you in all of it because I know you're going to deliver work. It helps to build trust, and trust leads to loyalty. So there's a whole kind of positive cycle that comes from that.
You mentioned in a previous conversation that employees are consumers.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, think about how you operate as a consumer. You go out to a store and you say, I want to buy this for these reasons. You're kind of analyzing and filtering, and you're choosing where you want to shop or where you want to go or where you want to eat based on what they can offer to you. And that's very much the way employees are engaging with employers right now. What can you offer to me? How flexible are you going to be? What's the culture that underpins all of it? So if something changes for me, is that going to mean I need to make a change, or will I have the opportunity to have that dialogue with you? So I think employees right now are saying like, here are my priorities. Maybe it's career growth. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's certain hobbies or other things. These are my kind of big priorities. How can work fit into that? Whereas for a very long time, it was flipped. It was, I have to get the work piece done. Let me check that box. And then in any time left over, I will do my life things. So very much a consumer approach. Employers should be approaching the way they market their brand to employees in a consumer fashion as well.
Pat, as a business founder, and even you mentioned that you're hiring people out of school, so you're really actually experiencing that Gen Z workforce. What are your
even just hearing, I echo what Jess was saying, but the one thing when we kept saying like what the great changes is the great exodus, the great entrance, all this stuff, it's all prefaced by great, and I think that's when I get excited, and I think that's what the Gen Z and the Gen X and all the gens are looking for, is some optimism, and I think so it's great. Like, look at all these opportunities that this new environment has presented us, and now we can take the ball and run it. And that's what, because I go up against, we're small, and I go up against some of the largest employers that can throw more money at people than I could possibly even ever come up with. And so I have to couple the course for optimism, especially when all the stuff in the environment's going around, with the purpose that I think Jess mentioned, that, and I'm a big fan of that believer of the Simon Sinek, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that couldn't be more important than right now. So as I'm talking to the new people coming in, or even the existing player, like, it's, oh my gosh, look what just happened. This provides us with the most important opportunity we have. And here's why we're doing it. And here's what your day-to-day means, because I'm never going to be able to beat the biggest employers with financially. I'm certainly going to have to try and move up to that. I can't undercut. But that optimism coupled with purpose is the most important thing for us. And then adding, and making it genuine. So making the points during the work week live up to it. So what we're doing is trying to make sure that people have a chance to discuss what they're working on and why it matters to them, and question or get ideas from other people at the same time. So there's points where we're just listening to the people talk and I'm keeping my mouth shut. So those are the things that they're looking for. And then they're telling their friends, like, hey, why don't you come and join in on these conversations we're having at our company, even if they don't work here. and then they get to see the ideation and all that kind of stuff happen.
Christelle, you're in the business to kind of anticipate what the future of office work looks like, or corporate real estate and all the different trends that are happening. What are you seeing? What's your opinion in terms of where people are heading?
It's funny because we're seeing all this impact secondhand, right? We're experiencing it through real estate, but what we're experiencing is very much the same that you've heard Jess and Patrick mention: choice, flexibility. The other thing I would add that we're really noticing is collaboration and community, right? This place where you come together and you collaborate, you ideate, you network, you share your work, your experience. What we've noticed through the process is the junior employees have suffered the most because they didn't get that training and that mentoring. So there are people wanting to come back to the office to also visible and to have that career growth that it's very difficult to achieve remotely. And so I'd like to coin it and back to your consumer and retail experience comment, the return to experience. People have used during COVID, we all tapped into our social capital. We had a piggy bank of our social capital with our colleagues and with our partnership and relationship, and we tap into that saving account. The juniors don't have that benefit of having that saving account. So how do you help them build it? And we're going to have to make the office attractive. We're going to have to make people want to come to the office, create that FOMO and come there. And back again to the retail experience with online buying and online commerce, retails have had to rethink retail and rethink the way we attract people into a brick and mortar retail and store. What's really interesting actually post-pandemic from our retail group is actually activity in retail stores is pretty high and people are craving to come back. So it gives us a good indication that we're social animals and ultimately we want that experience. It's just as employers, we're going to have to think about what this experience look like, what are the needs, how do you empower your employee to choose and to be responsible. And then the office is going to look very different. It's going to be a community place where you come and collaborate.
So you brought up a good point, and actually going back to Pat's comment of Simon Sinek, there was, and I always look at talent trends that have been coming through, and in 2016 and 2017 it was talking about grit, and then Simon Sinek had a few books, and his philosophy is really empathetic leadership. And, it has to start from the top in terms of how, people are led and how they feel, appreciated. And how does this, change of how we work, how does empathetic leadership, play into it? And, I read some articles that talk about, going into this remote work, really highlighted a lot of weak management, in terms of how the people were managing them, and it put a little bit more pressure on managers. And another interesting, I don't have the stat here, but a large part of some of the attrition was actually middle level managers who were moving because, well, they just didn't feel like they were in control. Talk a little about anyone.
So activity-based, what we call activity-based working, which is choose where you want to work and the kind of environment you need for certain activity, has started 15 years ago. It's not new. It's been made possible by technology and broadband internet, and adoption has been way slower than we anticipated. And the biggest barrier for that was middle management. And the reason why is they felt they need to be physically next to their employee to be able to manage them. The big discovery through remote working is actually employees are very much accountable. They're very much productive. And you don't need to breathe over their shoulder for them to be doing their work and to be responsible. I think that was a big awakening and a big discovery. And to your point, it's also a big struggle because you have to retool yourself and rethink about the way you are going to do that. But it's now flipped, right? Middle managements are the ones who are like, I really don't need to go to the office. And employers and leaders saying, no, actually you need to because your mentees need you there. So it's actually a very interesting dynamic and a 180 that happened in that context.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. Some of our more senior people, I remember it was like, 5-10 years ago, we used to do the air quotes, oh, you're working from home, and it was like, oh, that's frowned upon. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves in that environment, like, well, it's a kind of not too bad, but they're the ones that have changed a lot more because the early state people were coming right out of school, like, yeah, I'm just working from home, I'm getting more done. And it was just accepted. And the whole mentality change, I think the biggest changes come in the middle managers and trying to accept it themselves. One of the things I've found interesting talking to some other people, how are you measuring whether or not you're successful? And is one tech company that I taught, a very large financial services firm, said it's the number of commits that they were doing in GitHub. He's like, just went through the roof. We're killing it. I'm not sure that's the best measurement because they're also killing the number of hours that they're working in. But it is interesting to see how people are measuring whether or not they're successful or not, or this is actually working.
One other thing I'll add on the management side is I think for a long time, managers felt like they were serving the company. And they were focused on like, I need to make sure my team is abiding by the policies, following all the rules, doing what like the enterprise says needs to happen. And I think, Steve, to your point about empathetic leadership, that has flipped as well. Now it's you're serving your team. How do you support them? How do you enable them? And many people maybe, have had that servant leader mindset over time. But I think the policy inside organizations, there's a recognition that those don't work. It creates this box. It creates this one size fits all approach. So guardrails are great, but hard and fast policies that managers feel like they need to use to toe the line are sort of fading into the background. And this focus on being more empathetic, understanding like, what do you need to get your work done in this day, and how do I enable that? Is I think where those managers will be the ones that win, and the ones that can't adopt or adapt to that will certainly maybe move away from leadership overall. I want to come back to one other thing that Christelle was saying too about the workspace, and we talk a lot about working remotely and how productive that is. I do think people want to go back, but they just want a reason to be there. So I've our data shows, we see feedback that people, sometimes, especially Gen Z, they'll go into the office and then no one else is there. So they're like, why am I here? I should have just stayed home. But if there is some type of event, or maybe it's a weekly communal thing that's happening, or daily, like little half an hour touch point that creates that connection and community, that will draw people in for those intentional moments, and certainly kind of bigger collaborative activities. And the future really is hybrid. Like it will be a combination of both, getting into that flow state at home and then getting into the office to be connected with people.
Christelle, I want to ask you, because you're on the front line and just picking on what Jess just picked up on. I'm seeing and hopefully this doesn't take us off direction, but I'm seeing the larger companies invest heavily in real estate plays for the future, with the expectation that we'll just go back to normal, or at least that's the perception. Is there something that I'm missing that they see, or is there a different workplace that?
I think we see two camps in this. Larger companies have been holding back the return to the office for safety, mainly safety reason, right? And they have a big liability, but they also, some of them have this really strong feelings, and you see it in the press, financial services and others, that people, like the work is happening and the energy and the ideation and the collaboration happens in the office, and they want them back. So they're making big bet that they will be back. Now, on average, most of our company are thinking the space is going to be different. The amount of time people spend in the office and the days they spend to the office is probably going to be 2 or 3 days a week. How they manage the rules around it, meaning is there some guardrail? I try to flatten that 2 or 3 days so I don't have a big peak. They're all handling it a little bit differently. So some of them feel like maybe I'll need 10 or 20% less real estate. So it really, there is really two camps, and some are very vocal about it has to happen in the office. So there's a couple of big tech companies are well known for that, and some financial service companies.
So it's a perfect segue point to go on to the next topic. Excuse me. The FLSA, or Fair Labor and Standards Act, of 1938 is when we originally talked about the 80-hour workday and the 5 days a week. And the American work week is ingrained in our culture. I mean, I don't know how many country songs talk about, the work week and, 5 o'clock somewhere, working 9 to 5, and it's really, how can we imagine anything else, and especially and thank you, Dr. Shertak, for bringing it up, is that, a lot of us, it's all we know and it's all we think is the right way of doing it. I mean, the rest of the world has followed suit in terms of a lot of the ways that the U.S. work. But that was 84 years ago. and innovation of technology and mobilization and globalization is forcing a change. And remote work is not really a new concept. We just changed the name. It used to be called telecommuting, and JCPenney in the 1980s did it with their call center. And IBM actually did it as a trial in the 70s, and it got up to 2,000 employees, and it really continues today. So, it's not really something that is new, but, we are forced to look at what is it that we're doing and how we're affecting it. Here's some additional, statistic points from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2019, 6% of Americans worked officially from home full time. That's 9.4 million people. So it's not a small number when you think about it. In 2021, 26% worked full time. Now, a reference point here is in June of 2020, it was 44%. So 44% is 69 million people, and 22% is 35. So this is obviously not going away, as we talked about it, but hybrid seems like it's a trendy word, and you guys are already starting talking about that. It's not too trendy, but hybrid by nature of its definition is a blend of two different things, which means that it's different for everybody. So, even when you look at your own companies, how do you define hybrid as an ideal form? How do you figure that out? And how does employee, benefit from that, so that, because obviously the idea is that we want the voice of the employee to be heard so that we, create further engaged people. So what is that? Who wants to go? Pat?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. It's kind of interesting. A hybrid, I just think of the basic definition of part working from home, part working from the office. But to echo your statement, the genie's out of the bottle. This isn't going back. I think what's interesting is I reflect back on, we had a very similar company before this, a little bit larger, but it was all the digital space, and we were hiring young workforce, and it was the office environment in our meetings helped define the company. Where we're actually being a little bit more intentional of like, what is the company and what is our purpose and how does our work environment actually support that? So I'll give you an example. One very funny thing is, like, I remember last time we would create the mini golf course in our office, core drill into the ground, because that defined us, and like, oh, look, we're cool. We have all this kind of stuff. I mean, no one ever actually used it. But you can't do that anymore. And that's not there. So that goes away. And then, the meetings that we would have, it was we'd have once a week, we'd stand up, and at the end of the week, we'd plan for the next week and all that kind of stuff. And because everyone was in the office, you had them in this one conference room, and that doesn't happen anymore. We have the kickoff meetings, but then we have midweek meetings like, how you doing? How's the week going? And then Fridays are family days, because we want to get to know you a little bit more, or bring in a jazz musician who goes into the flow state so we can see how we're working with that. But it's the the week and the things that we get together to meet with that defines who the company is and supports and pushes the mission instead of the physical space, which I think is kind of interesting. I think, as Christelle pointed out and Jess stated too, the space isn't going to go away. I think we still need a place to call home and to come in, ideate, and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's another supportive mechanism to what's the purpose of the company.
If I can add to that, to your point, so it's not new. It used to be it's the office or it's home, and there's a mix of both. It is actually, when we survey people, there are very few people who say 100% office and very few people that say 100% at home. It's always a combination of the two. And actually, as we're expanding and growing and technology is there and tools are there, it actually goes beyond just home or office. It can be you're traveling, you're meeting some clients. It can be a co-working environment. It can be the lounge of an airport. It can be a hotel room. We can work from anywhere. So back to your 9 to 5, it used to be that at 5, you shut the door of the office and you're done. We're not. We work all the time. So it is actually, we call it a hybrid. I like to call it fluid and kind of need to adapt to it. And so the space needs to change too, to adapt to all the activity we're doing. And that activity-based working, when you think about the 4 walls of an office and thinking about what you come and do, we're thinking it's going to evolve. It's going to evolve of being less of heads down work, because you can do the heads down work at home or maybe in a suburban office or co-working place where you can go and hide from the family and the noise and whatever is going on at home. But it doesn't necessarily means 45 minutes commute to come to the hub, because you're not necessarily coming to collaborate. So thinking about what is it you're coming to do and how the space in the 4 walls needs to change to accommodate that. And what we're starting to see when we do studies with our clients is it's going to be much more huddle space, conference room, meeting rooms, whiteboards, some phone booth, because the open space to do a Zoom meeting, I don't know if you've tried, it's not the most fun environment. So how do we think through the activity and the journey that people are going through during one day, and how do we design space that achieve that? And that's really the challenge that is happening. We did survey of our clients. 87% of them says the hybrid work is there. What's really interesting is actually smaller companies are the ones that have come back to work more, because for them, that notion of culture and collaboration is actually really, really important when you're starting up and you're growing. So we're seeing level of attendance and in the office and bringing people together much, much higher than larger company. It is a very interesting tidbit.
So you and Jess, I know you want to comment on this, but are in this hybrid environment, and Jess, this might be kind of coordinated to your comment. Are we creating a 2-tiered system though? You know, because one of the interesting things that we look at historically of telecommuting is that they were certain specific jobs. Everybody who was telecommuting usually had a similar job in that company, and that was just this job telecommutes. It's not that, you know, oh, this accountant works in this office and this other accountant under the same team works here at home, and this other person goes in 2 days a week. How do you actually create meeting environments? How do you make people feel combined? I mean, there's a disparity already in terms of, hey, what's everybody doing for lunch? You know, well, I'm making my own. You know, it's so. Are we creating this 2-tiered system that will have future impact in terms of how people are treated equitably?
Steve, I think it's a great call out, and definitely something that companies need to be hyper focused on right now. What Patrick was saying earlier about culture, I think, is the right place to start. So looking at your values as a company, kind of that North Star, that purpose that you've established for your organization, and then creating clarity around those behaviors to support your purpose, to support your values, will help get everyone clear on what it means for me based on the choices I want to make. So the other thing is, I don't think it's just the leaders or the powers that be inside organizations that are going to need to adapt here. I also think it's employees. You know, if your colleagues choosing to work remote more frequently than maybe you are, then how are you making sure they're still included in the in-office discussions that are happening? So everyone's going to have to adapt their mindset a bit and remember, and we've all been in that meeting before where we're like, oh, we have to call so-and-so. Like, you know, it's like, oh, like we're 10 minutes into the meeting. We forgot to call that person. Like we have to kind of make sure now that everyone's going through that process of, you know, our culture is hybrid, our culture is inclusive, and we want to make sure everyone's working in the best environment for them. So how do we kind of set norms, establish those behaviors to really support creating that equity? I also think from a leadership standpoint, managers need to pay attention. So where are maybe they not, you know, maybe someone's working more remote and they haven't connected with them in a week or 2 weeks. Like you need to be more proactive and reach out. So one thing that we see in our data is that from a gender standpoint, females tend to want to work remotely more frequently than males. They also know specifically when their boundary times are, so when they would prefer to be unavailable. And if a manager asks those questions and really pays attention to that information, you can easily lead with equity and in an equitable fashion. But if you aren't thinking about those things, it will get missed, and you'll unintentionally schedule time when, you know, maybe your females need that boundary and you're scheduling meetings so they feel pressured to join, or you're not seeing your female employees as much in the office and therefore more men are getting promoted. All things that need to be paid attention to. But if you set it up by asking those questions, understanding what people need right now, and check in periodically, or use our technology to do it, then it gives managers the opportunity to lead better and lead in this hybrid working environment.
I think that's interesting. I'm curious if you found out on that statistic of females wanting to work more remotely and then within the bounds. Why is that? What's behind that? Do you know? Or
yeah, so I think probably more data. We probably need more data to really peel back some of the layers. The hypothesis around it is that females tend to multitask really well and have a lot of the, you know, child rearing and household responsibilities. So prefer to be remote because they can get started right away at work. They cut out that commuting time, they finish, and then they get into their household responsibilities. The most frequent boundary for females is 6 to 9 p.m. So, you know, when you think about it, how many work events have you had in those hours where and that's putting more stress on your females than on your males, who would probably rather be there for maybe it's dinner time with the family, or they've got some other obligation during those hours at night. But I think the biggest root is probably family, and just managing the household and feeling like being remote and setting clear boundaries helps with that.
And that's super important to us to understand that, because in this hybrid environment now, that for our business, machine learning, data, stuff like that, you have to have context to be able to analyze the data. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion is extremely important, not just for the right reasons, but for business reasons. Like I can't have someone who's looking at a data set be from Mars and not from where that data set originated. Totally. So keeping up on how do we make sure we're becoming a diverse organization is really, really hard, but couldn't be more important right now than ever. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side, and to that point, Patrick, of diversity and inclusiveness, the other thing we're noticing is now that we've broken down the physical barrier of coming to a hub in New York City, for example, now the range of talent you could hire is broadening. So we're actually, as we've seen employees actually wanting a better work-life balance, and working in better environment and moving to second or third tier cities, we're actually also seeing companies starting to look for different talent pools in second or third tier cities, even like international and global cities. And it does several things. Some of it is obviously a cost play, but it's also allowing them to actually tap into different diverse talent pools that sometimes it's a little harder in the first tier city to achieve. So we've seen actually company take advantage of that hybrid working and that more flexible and fluid way to look at work to expand the range of talent they can reach to.
And that's fascinating. I spoke with a CEO out of Richmond, Virginia, 600-person company who purposely went there because before all this co-working space or hybrid workspace, so that he could hire a less expensive workforce that's just as good. And now he's having the opposite effect because Google's hiring the majority of his employees away, which is really killing him. But he's struggling with this right now.
Well, yeah, and that's on that point. There's Facebook talked about, they're doing a huge push to hire nationally, but they also made a point to say that they're not offering California salaries. They're going to actually start adjusting to the cost of living of and what's equitable in that area. Going back that two-tiered system and looking at fair and equitable practices, we made a lot of recommendations of what people could do. Do you think that this is a future thing that we all need to create as a priority to make sure that it doesn't get worse? Because DEI has always been first and foremost in HR and talent acquisition because it hasn't gone away. And now we've just created a different playing field. And yeah, we do have more options because we now expand the region. But did that change of region really change the initiative of what we're trying to accomplish? So I'm just curious. Just nod your head if you think this is if second tiered systems, or do you think we're going to face a next level of diversity issues, in the coming years? So,
Steve, I think that the diversity challenges will continue and new ones will pop up, and we will address them as they come. I think what the great companies are doing right now is trying to think really big picture. Where are all the points of failure that we could experience around creating an inclusive workforce, creating that sense of belonging for people, and making our company a place where very diverse talent pools want to come work. It'll then be kind of baked into the culture, the norms, the behaviors of the employees. It really is top down, and it will permeate every single level of every organization. So I don't think the challenges are going away. I think that we have this really wonderful opportunity right now to talk about it. Whereas I think before it was like, well, this is not, we're all on the hamster wheel. Let's just keep running and hopefully something will change one day. And like, that wasn't going to happen. We needed the pandemic to shake things up. And here we are. And I think it will create more challenges, but also, looking at it on the positive, like Patrick was saying earlier, more opportunities for us to just reimagine how work can really be designed for life. And that's what people want at the end of the day, that fluidity that Christelle was talking about, that flexibility. And I think employees recognize that what they need changes over time. I think the faster employers recognize that, the more competitive they'll become as employers in the market.
Christelle, you mentioned, and actually just to a similar context of when people will actually work. You talked about that 6 to 9 p.m. time frame, and everybody always talks about work-life balance. But as we get into this hybrid environment, it's actually not even a balance. It's actually a work-life fusion. Where it's I am working and then I'm not working. I'm working and then I'm not working. And it was always a running joke with my wife, who had like a 20-minute drive And she always says, I need that time to decompress. I've spent my whole day just thinking about work, and I don't want to bring it home, and I just need to be able to decompress. That's not happening anymore, and some people are natural at being able to multitask and manage different scenarios and be able to separate personal and business stuff. But what I'm seeing in terms of a lot of new articles that are coming out is employee burnout. Even though they're working from home, they're probably working harder and longer, and are accessible, throughout all times of the day. A lot of companies used to do that, but it looks like it's now all companies are kind of doing that. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if you guys saw last week, I think it's Portugal that came out with that bill saying employers cannot send emails to employees after 5 p.m. It's illegal to do so. I don't know if we're going to get there. I think actually there's and companies are thinking about it. Like mental health was very much at the forefront of what a lot of the HR group were trying to tackle in a lot of companies, and continues to be. As we see companies and HR group being involved in the workplace strategy, there are a few things that are really strongly coming up. The empathetic management is one of those, where they need to feel like they need to train people, but also that notion of work-life balance. I don't know about you, but at CBRE, we had screensavers that says, hey, take care of yourself. Think about you. Like, think about recharging. So it's really, we're all learning, but we're seeing companies really actively thinking about it. And how can we manage that? Because part of the great resignation that we've seen within the knowledge worker, I think, was tied to that. Was tied to the fact that the world was changing, people wanted to retain their job, or they needed to completely rethink the industry and the work they were in, and there were more work to be done. There's this blending between life and work. And so it's there. I'm not close to it, so I don't know all the ins and outs, but I definitely see that it's top of mind with the real estate and HR groups and C-suite, that we need to figure out and train people on how to manage that. We need to train managers in terms of expectations. So maybe not going to where Portugal is, but setting expectation. Okay, it's convenient for me to send an email at 9 p.m. because this is when I put the kids to bed, I'm done, I can work another 1 hour or two. But what is the expectation? Like, how are people who are going to receive that email feel about it? Do they feel they have to answer? Or is it acceptable culturally to say, hey, you sent it during your own time, but I don't have to answer to it? So there's a lot of training and learning to do. The other thing we're working on in terms of equity, and going back to the earlier topic, is we're working a lot on the technology in the office, technology that we put in the hands of employees to try to break that barrier between physical and virtual. We're not there yet. I tried personally with my team the Oculus and doing the whiteboard session with the Oculus. I felt a little nauseous, I have to tell you. And then the other thing that is the weirdest thing is that when you have the glasses on, you can't take notes because you can't see your pad. So it's actually a little weird thing. So point being, we're all working on it. I'm expecting and I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of innovation in that world to bring the physical and the virtual closer together to help bridge the gap of the inequities. We have a long way to go, but I'm optimistic.
That's great. Since this is a new platform and I'm a bit of a nerd, I did want to actually try a poll here and see if everybody's still awake. But this kind of aligns with the topic that we have. And let's see what we come out of this, and welcome everybody's opinion once this is done. Interesting. I think that's the majority. So it looks like trust in leadership is certainly leading that. Anything that surprises you?
Community impact. I wonder if that's kind of gone away because it's such a remote area. That surprises me.
Maybe it's not number one, though.
That's right. Yeah.
One thing I'll share, trust in leadership, like back to the burnout comment, Steve, as well, is leaders need to be asking people about when their boundaries are, or when are they unavailable, creating permission for people to say that, because sometimes it's hard as an employee to walk in and say, hey, like I am consistently unavailable at this time. And then you feel like you're going to get a why, or there's a dialogue there. So if the employer is asking that question, they're creating the clarity, expectation setting, and the permission for the employee to say, yes, I can be unavailable at some point in time. I refer to today's working style as work-life harmony, that you're trying to create that balance that isn't like equal scales. It's just that it's all working together in a way that seems to work for you. So, and I think a big piece of that is having permission to say when you can't be working or when you're not going to be focused on looking at your email. The other thing, I just read this article about healthcare workers and how there's this mass exodus out of healthcare because of the burnout and stress. And so I think something to think through and kind of in terms of breaking up or reimagining the work week construct is certain jobs are going to require more rest and recharge time. Think about an athlete. They perform, a football player. They get on the field on Sundays or Monday Night Football. They leave everything there and they're resting for days after that. They have that chance to recuperate and rest. And we need to think about jobs in a way. And I go to healthcare because, I feel for everyone in that space currently. But any job, there has to be the right balance of in high stress periods, high stress times, you're going to get to that burnout state faster. So how are companies putting structures in place, changing the composition of shifts, or thinking about why don't you compress to a 3-day week, take 4 days off. But in 3 days, I know I'm going to get this level of productivity from you that's going to be through the roof. So I think everything's on the table. It's worth really looking at that closely to understand how do you give people the rest and recharge time so that they can come back mentally refreshed as well as the physical and the emotional.
Yeah. Another survey that shows that over the next 6 months, 70% of workers anticipate to return to office. However, 39% and over a third, would leave, if the companies were not offering some sort of flexibility of work location. And another article, and this is directly for Christelle, but would welcome everybody's comments, is that there was on Bloomberg, there was an article that said that larger corporations are actually doubling down on their real estate and actually looking at prime real estate that has close transportation, access to really good restaurants, and really kind of, ignoring the original idea of maybe hub and spoke is the future of work. First question is, for everybody here is what is hub and spoke, so that everybody kind of understands that. But then, I'd love to hear your reaction to, larger corporations and corporate real estate.
Yeah. So a few points to your comments right now to give you an idea. The average occupancy across the U.S. of the office is between, I'm quoting, and I can give back with the exact numbers top of head, between 25 and 30%. We've got areas like Texas or Florida that are above the national average, and cities like San Francisco or New York that are slightly lower. I think New York is right about at the average. So that gives you an idea. And it's been slowly ramping up over the summer and since the beginning of the year. And we're optimistic it's going to continue coming up. You're seeing, for people who have been in New York City, the energy is the energy is back and the office are filling up. Where do I start?
Well, I guess are we, are larger corporations trying to go back to?
So they're coming back for sure. There's a flight to quality. So this is what you're saying. Some of it is just real estate dynamic, right? When there's a little bit more vacancy in the real estate, you can afford, and the rents have slightly gone down. You can afford to go to better places. It's part of the war for talent. We, as real estate people, will always like to think that real estate is a big part of attraction and retention of employees. I actually think it's a little different. It's more, tell me what your workplace look like, and I'll tell you what your culture is like. So it tells a lot about the culture of a company, depending on how you're investing in that space and the kind of environment you want to offer your employee. And that's what you're really seeing with that flight to quality. How does it translate into square footage and the amount of space they're taking? It varies by companies. Now, hub and spoke. The idea, it has always existed, right? We want to reduce people's commute time because this is not the most productive time, even though it can be 20 minutes can be relaxing. When you look at cities like San Francisco or LA or Seattle, where commute time of people are really, really long, this is just not something people want to have. So you're looking at, and back to the different mode of working I was talking about, you come to the hub to collaborate, but you might want a spoke. So meaning an office is closer to your home, where you don't have to commute as much to go and do heads down work. And when companies are looking to put spoke to kind of enable that for their employees, what they're realizing is that if they do a commute analysis, where do I put the spoke? How big should it be? It's expensive to put those little spokes together. And it's really hard to figure out how big it should be and how many people are going to be able to come to it. The people who needs to work together are not necessarily in the same suburb, right? And the hub makes the most sense for them to come and collaborate. So it's just, there's a practicality to the spoke that is very difficult to design and to implement. And so what actually companies have done is they're thinking now of doing that virtual spoke, that third place where they're looking to achieve the nice thing about, I'm going to call it co-working or flex space. It's the WeWork, the Regis, the managed office you talked about, the Industrious, this kind of companies, using that network of places. Think about it the way you think about renting a car or an Uber. You don't have to own that car. Like, it doesn't have to be always the same one. You've learned to pick your mode of transportation based on what you need to do. Think about it the same way. So through COVID, we've seen a really big adoption of that kind of flexible space environment. So, hey, to my employee, hey, here it is. Here is a little studio where you can go and work. And then because it's flexible, you can readjust based on how people are using it. They're now even like on demand. You go into an app and you book an office for an hour, for a day, a conference room. So the digitization of real estate is starting finally, or the hotelification of real estate is finally starting. Like, think about space as a service. And instead of doing brain damage and putting a lot of capital expenses in an office, we're not really sure how big it should be and where it should be. Just put that in the hands of your employees and tell them, hey, here's a place where if you need to go and work quietly, close to home, here is a series of location where you can go and book a space to go and work.
Christelle, I think
virtual spoke.
I think it all comes back to what you said earlier, just about it is about the employee experience. So, Steve, maybe the office near the cool restaurants in the hot city is part of that experience. And then the spoke I'm sitting in co-working space right now myself, that the opportunity to go and be somewhere else, kind of change the environment, but it's very close to my house, I think is something that I appreciate, and certainly that others do as well. But it's all about that kind of holistic experience that employees are looking for that is different for each of them.
Yeah, one thing that goes through my head is that I think that if you're a large employer and you're going to say you have to show up, like everyone's required to come back, you should have a pretty good answer that's different from the one 4 years ago as to why. And maybe even the way you frame that question of like, we believe that this happens, whatever, and listening to the employees, to their response. Because I know a mid-tier financial services company here is hearing one of the larger ones saying, we're going to require people to come back. And they are just frothing, like, I can't wait till they require their employees because we're going to gain a lot of them back on. And they're just waiting outside the door saying, we'll take your resume or whatever it might be. It's just something I think it needs to be really thought through and with empathy. And I think that's how we started it out too.
Yeah, Patrick, you said earlier that the genie's out of the bottle. Employees don't want to be put in a box anymore. They, and we can all relate to that. We don't want someone.
They're not a statistic.
So, like, if you're the companies that are saying you must be in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, people are like, no, you can go pound sand. Like, that is not, that's not going to work for me, and I can go find a different job.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Shertok, what you just said. I once had a boss who was absolutely totally convinced that Salesforce was slacking off when they're out. Like, that's a gone day. I believe. I don't know.
Yeah. What's very interesting is for us law firms, I've been the ones that are known to be like the most in the office ever. And we're even starting to see a shift with law firms starting to rethink, do they really need to be in the office all the time? And like, what does it look like and what does it mean?
Right. Well, law firms, if you're not in the office, you're not billing. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, yeah. So we are, I have one quick poll again. Just to, let me see, where am I? Here we go. This one's an easy one. Just to get a sense of who's listening. Good. Yep. Looks kind of what we thought. Interesting that we don't have any votes for in-office full-time. It just means that we have a very forward-thinking attendance. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not surprised. I think hybrid or remote full-time are taking precedent. I think we'll start to see some of that remote full-time drop a bit as hopefully the pandemic does move behind us, but it's hybrid or remote, and that's what we see and hear. And from an employee perspective, in terms of personal preferences, that's what we see that they want. Very few want to go back full time.
Definitely wanted to thank everybody for your time. I think we're about ready to go into our separate breakout groups, and I'll let Dean take over from here.
Thank you so much, Steve, and all our panelists for a great conversation. And as I said, we are now going to seamlessly move in, which you're going to see a notice coming on your screen here shortly, into roundtable discussions. You can pick your topic. We're grateful for our panelists to host each of those tables and continue the dialogue for the next 25 minutes or so. Heidi will click that through and you'll be able to link to the table of your choice. And again, you can move just again, want to thank Steve and all of our panelists, and certainly our sponsors, Boomi, SEI, Cigniti, Vanguard, and Juno. We encourage you to continue the conversation. You know, you've met some great people that have some tremendous insights. That is the purpose and goal of the Talent Connect Roundtable, is to bring together people from different backgrounds, obviously all focused in high-growth tech companies. And with that, I wish you a great rest of your day and look forward to future conversations around talent and growth. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
See you.
Thank you.